Good afternoon and welcome to the Vault Resources conference call regarding the strategic European lithium acquisition. All attendees are in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask a question, please enter it in the Q&A panel within Zoom. I'll now hand over to Vault Resources Managing Director, Trevor Matthews. Over to you, Trevor.
Great, thanks, Alex. And good morning, sort of viewing from. Quite a big announcement, or a very big announcement for Vault today, with the acquisition of these tenements in Serbia, in Europe, or tenement applications. So we have 3 projects, and what I'll do is just run through a presentation. Vault's not a one-trick pony, by the way. So while we picked up these lithium tenements, we had pretty significant assets in the graphite minerals and moving to downstream processing. So we have a number of different aspects to our strategy. We also have some gold assets in the company that we're looking to move forward with as well. But today we'll talk mainly about the lithium acquisition and perhaps more broadly about the battery materials supply chain. So with that, I'll just share the screen. If you'll just bear with me while I get part of the presentation up and running. So I'm not running through the whole presentation. That's been lodged on the ASX this morning along with the announcements. I'll just be talking to particular slides that'll help me summarize it and probably hopefully get through this in about 10 minutes. It's just doesn't want to move just at the moment. Andy. Sorry, slight technical hitch there. Important notices, usual stuff about forward-looking statements and CP statements. So all the information around the project, historical information has been reviewed and signed off by a competent person in accordance with the JORC code. So people can get some comfort about the information that we're providing in relation to these tenement or license applications. So what this does is move us to being a multi-commodity battery mineral supplier. We're already in operations in the Ukraine, producing graphite there. We're looking at developing a project in Tanzania in graphite, downstream processing, producing battery anode material to supply to cell makers. And this lithium license application in Serbia gives us another European asset that we can work with in addition to our Ukraine project, and more broadly our European strategy about becoming a supplier to cell makers and battery makers in Europe and also in the United States. So Acina is Acina Investment is the name of a company that holds either holds the key licenses or has rights to them. So we're acquiring 100% of Acina Investment. Acquisition considerations approximately 36 million Vault shares. Some conditions to be met before we issue those. I'll run through those in a minute. Acina, we expect this process to complete and license to be granted very early on in Q1 2022. Could even occur late this year, but I think it's better to be a little bit prudent around timing. It takes about 6 months to get an application approved in Serbia, so hence the sort of timeframes we're talking about. So these applications have been in for some period of time since mid-year. 3, we define them as highly prospective, particularly Jadar North, which is positioned alongside Rio Tinto's world-class Jadar project. So, the resource base there is pretty close to 140 million tonnes, running at very high grades of lithium and borate. So these are multi-product mineralisation deposits in these areas. So between us and Rio, we will pretty much control 100% of what's called the Jadar Basin. So this basin is highly prospective for lithium and borate mineralisation. Some work already done on the ground that we have, some limited drilling, which we'll cover in a minute. In terms of there's 4 drill holes that have been drilled in the past many years ago, and the tenement's pretty much been in hands but idle over that period of time. We have two other projects, Petlovaka and Lieg, which are very similar in terms of this basin style of collection of lithium and borate mineralisation combined with other sedimentary material that sort of collects in the basins and then layers up, and that's what you're targeting to find is these bedded style mineralisations of lithium and borate. Right in Europe, so very strategic, not in the EU, but strong facilitation around these Eastern European countries to assist Europe develop its own supply chains for battery materials. So the EBA and the ERMA, i.e. the European Battery Alliance and European Raw Materials Alliance, two key associations sponsored by the EU and the European Commission, and Volt's a member of both of those. And obviously our European projects, places pretty strongly to get facilitation and support through the EU sponsored bodies. Jadar itself, we have an initial program which I'll run through. Same with Lieg and Petlovaka, we see opportunities across all those tenements to conduct very similar exploration programs in the coming 12 months. Acquisition details, pretty simple, looks like a lot, but basically we acquire Ascena shares initially straight away. So within, take about a month for that to occur. Then we wait for we've got a shareholder approval process that we're going to run, which is really about placement capacity. And there are some license transfers that need to occur, and obviously the grants. So once all that's completed, we will then issue the shares and we'll have the granted licenses in our hands, and we'll start our exploration programs and other work after that. So that's all expected to occur again next quarter, probably by about mid-Feb, but might be a little bit earlier. Timing, the share swap agreement, which triggers this whole transaction and gives us the rights to acquire 100% of the issued shares in Ascena. So we're getting that while it still has the applications in place without actually issuing any shares until they're granted. So the shares, like I said, will take about a month to transfer into Volt's hands because of just document flows and doing these sort of things in Serbia. Licenses will be issued to Ascena, and including the Petlovaka license. Once that happens, then we'll issue the shares sometime probably around early Q1 2022. So reasonably, share swaps basically is what's going on. We get 100% of Ascena in exchange for 36 million Volt shares. Multi-commodity battery minerals focused company is what we're targeting to be. We're already a graphite producer, like I said, and developer. So we're leveraging our forward plans and growth and shareholder value around what I think are two really key growth commodities in the battery minerals supply chain. So I've already mentioned about the graphite business, but in a lithium-ion battery, the graphite mineral is the most utilised in the manufacture of a lithium-ion battery, and lithium is number 2. So we've got the two dominant minerals coming together in our portfolio, and we're already a producer of one and looking to go downstream into semi-processed materials that would be bought by cell makers. And we'd be aiming to do the same thing in the lithium project development as well. Spoken about its location in Europe, really strategic area to be based. EU is the biggest EV market in the world. It's bigger than China. US is number 3, so China sits in the middle. That's forecast to stay that way over the course of this decade. A lot of cell making facilities they're already in production or being in production, so they need supply of raw materials. So Europe is a really strategic area to be located. And there's a lot of sponsorship and facilitation come from the European Union and the European Commission through this process. Great infrastructure in place in both jurisdictions in Ukraine and Serbia. Highly prospective lithium assets. You look at Rio Tinto's committed US 2.4 billion for the Jadar development. So this is a world-class asset right on the neighbouring tenement within the same basin. And we've got the underexplored. They've put 440 holes to build out their project. We've so far had 4. So this is, very, very early stage, but all the right sort of signals and mineralisation and geology looks very strong for a successful opportunity for us to develop, our lithium resources in Serbia. Multiple graphite assets I've spoken about. Ukraine, it's called Zavalesky Graphite, small scale producer, but regularly gets named as the biggest graphite producer in Europe. Very few graphite projects in Europe for development. And when you look at the outlook for graphite, I'll just quickly mention that we need a 7-fold increase in supply by the course of this decade in graphite to meet just EV demand. Lithium, by the way, is 11-fold. So, I think we're sitting in two pretty undersupplied, and there'll be significant demand for these minerals over the course of just, the next 9 years. So we think we're in a great location, and we've got our big Banyu project, one of the biggest graphite resources in the world already, biggest in Tanzania, and we're just building this platform out so we can be a multi-asset, multi-mineral producer into the lithium-ion battery and other battery technology supply chain. Strong ESG focus, it is, we're in the space which is all about minimising carbon emissions in terms of, the development of batteries and EV technology. So, and also a highly experienced management team. I'm probably going to run out of time here. The asset overview, I've spoken about the 3 projects. Jadar North is obviously the one that's of prime interest because it's already had a successful outcome in exactly the same basin with the Jadar project. So Jadar North to us is a key tenement, but Petlovaka and Liig both have very good exploration potential. So, and basins of their own. I want you to have a look at this slide. This shows you just what we've got here. You can see Rio Tinto's Jadar project identified there. That's approximately the size of their project footprint. You have a look at just those black dots. Hopefully you can just see them. There's 4 of them on what is the new Jadar North license. Jadar West and Badania were old licenses, and one of the holes sits outside Jadar North. All 4 of those holes intersected lithium and borate mineralisation. Not economic, but they're right on the boundary line, and you can see that dark blue patch, which is a low gravity signal, is actually the area with most prospectivity. So no real drill holes through that. So that's going to be part of the phase 1 and phase 2 drilling programs for Jadar North. Similarly, we've got similar signatures at Petlovaka and at Liig. So, we think our whole package looks particularly prospective. So, pretty close to each other. There are Petlovaka, for instance, is only about 15 kilometres away from Jadar North. So managing, exploration programs and activities is pretty straightforward. Key focus for the next 12 months, obviously complete this Sasina transaction, but we see that as being, a reasonably straightforward process. Granting of licenses in Serbia is a pretty straightforward process, but does just take, they just allocate about 6 months for that process, but there's really very little risk about not being granted those licenses ultimately, and then we'll complete the transaction. The diamond drilling programs are outlined in the table. So by Q3 2022, we should be drilling on all 3 licenses, and there'll be, a bit of news flow around desktop work and other activities in the lead up to that, and then review of data and planning for phase 2 drilling. Zavalesky graphite's about production improvement. It's coming off relatively low. It's a turnaround asset, but it's got a great resource and a great location. So that's why we were pretty keen to move forward with it. Production improvement is targeting to get to nameplate of 30,000 tonnes per annum as planned there. Banyu development funding and the commencement of stage 1 construction is another objective over the coming 12 months. So we're pretty close to funding completion, but not quite there, but I remain confident we're going to get there. It's just taking longer than I would like. And some complete feasibility studies on downstream processing, so that'll put a few numbers around that. Technical product test work, and I mentioned our gold assets earlier on. So with that, I'll wrap up, and happy to answer any questions and in relation to either the acquisition or what Volt's broader portfolio of assets that we're working on in our strategy.
Thanks, Trevor. Thanks for the presentation. And for all attendees, if you would like to pose any questions, please just use the Q&A box bottom right. But just to kick off, Trevor, there's been a lot of focus on securing domestic supply chains in the US. Is the same sort of thing happening in Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in Europe, I would suggest it's more advanced because they've proceeded to develop these alliances, which have pretty significant membership right throughout the whole supply chain, from mining or mineral resource producers all the way to the recycling stage. So they're looking at a whole of life battery material supply chain rollout, sponsored by the EU. Two pretty significant alliances, and those alliances are set up to not only help you connect with technology partners, potential offtake customers. You're mixed in with all the major car makers as well in terms of the membership, and but also it's got a finance platform in both associations. So clearly they see financing and investment facilitation and offtakes and those sort of related activities as being pretty important. So, and they are absolutely focused on wanting to build out this supply chain to move away from, probably diversify the supply chain away from, dominated by China basically at the moment. In fact, 100% of graphite anode material comes from China. So all the all the cell makers in the US and Europe, and consequently the car makers, are totally dependent on Chinese supply there, and a significant portion of lithium products come out of China as well. So, and so this is about diversification and reducing risk, about supply chain issues, which are dominating these, supply chain disruption with COVID, supply chain transport costs, carbon footprints around transport are all topical. And I think if you're close to your end customers and you reduce that supply chain risk and cost and carbon footprint, then I think you're going to get a lot of support.
I've got a few questions coming in, but keep them coming. Dan asks, congrats on the announcement. What impact do you expect this acquisition to have on the funding for Bunyu?
Look, I think provided our share price responds appropriately, look, I don't think it'll have any, it's not going to have a negative impact. Look, one of the things banks look at when they're looking at financing is, your ability to raise money at particular points in time. So your market cap doesn't have a bearing on that. Fortunately, ours has gone up quite a bit since the start of the year, but we're a long way short of our peers. And I think, that's one of the value propositions of Volt is, given the assets that we've got in our mix and now added lithium to that portfolio, we trade at a significant discount to other companies that don't have any production, a long way off from getting into even construction and financing. And yet, unexplainably to me, but maybe there's some logic in it, we seem to be valued quite a lot less. So I think that's the upside for investors, and we're pushing on doing, implementing our strategy. So I think overall this will probably assist with the, with that discussions with the African banks that we've got underway, in terms of our position in battery mineral markets and Volt's long-term sort of strategy being implemented, which includes the development of Bunyu.
Got another congratulations here from Paul, who says, will winter in Serbia slow down any of the drilling programs? And if I can just add to that as well, is it too early to give any sense of the scale of the drilling you'd like to do?
In fact, not so much in the short presentation, but in the bigger one, we do get into, holes and the program. But yes, during winter, there's basically no diamond or any drilling undertaken because of the winter conditions. So, but we should be out of that towards the end of the first quarter. So in the context of our programs and work, that's not really going to impact on them. As I understand it, rig availability is quite good. So, we shouldn't have any holdups in securing diamond rigs. Phase one across all three projects, probably looking at about somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 metres of drilling, diamond holes on all 3 projects. And then the second phase would be something closer to around 10 to 12,000 metres of drilling on each project. So pretty substantial drilling, but they are deep holes, but you can space them out to, because of the style of the mineralisations, relatively flat and quite continuous. So.
Very good. Thanks, Trevor. We've just got time for one more. We've actually just had another question on the Bunyu funding. So I don't know if you're able to actually update on that and the proposed downstream graphite processing.
Yeah, yep. So on the Bunyu funding, and I've been saying for some period of time that I was confident we were going to complete it, and I still maintain that. It's just taking a bit longer, I think, dealing with an African development bank, which is who we're in discussions with. And it's beyond discussions, but, they will spend as much time as they want in terms of, pushing these things through their credit committee. And so, we're right at that stage. It doesn't guarantee we're going to get through that, but, based on all the conversations and the exchange of information, as I said, I still remain confident that we'll get there. I just can't be certain about timing, exact timing with that. But we're moving forward there on the downstream processing. As I mentioned earlier on, we're about to start feasibility studies on the development of those plants. Because of the nature of it, it's not like developing a project, they're just fixed installations of equipment in a, some sort of shed or factory sort of facility. So you just really pick your location, probably triggered a fair bit by energy sourcing. So if you're looking for renewable energy, which is what we'll be targeting, that's part of the selection process. But, we've already started flow sheet design, but we just need to roll that down into some engineering studies and then roll out the economics. And so those studies shouldn't take anywhere near as long as what it takes to complete a mine feasibility study. So we'll complete those over the course of probably the following couple of quarters.
And just one last one, particularly in the context of the opportunity for graphite in Europe. You're the only producing graphite mine in Europe, and there's going to be exponential increases in demand. Can you just give us a bit of info on the corporate changes at Zavaleski, and when do you think it could be that full output nameplate is achieved?
Sure. Actually, I'll just correct it because we're not, there is some other small scale production in Europe, but Zavaleski is the generally, fits into the largest graphite producer and certainly has one of the biggest, if not the biggest mineral resource in Europe. So our plans to get to nameplate are still being a little bit refined, but we're looking at pretty significant production improvements as we proceed forward over the next 6 to 12 months. And we'll report on that as we see them, particularly through the quarterly reporting process, but perhaps interim updates as well, depending on how that's progressing. What we're seeing is really quite significant improvements in pricing because of those supply chain issues we mentioned. And in terms of getting to nameplate, look, I'd love to see us achieve that by the end of this next year. But I think a lot of that is driven by, recent appointments, which we'll announce soon on the CEO and CFO in that business. And, the implementation of plans that we see will improve the business. So not all capital development, a lot of it's really related to just changing the way they work. And we see some low-hanging fruit in terms of our ability to get improved performance out of Zavaleski. And then that expanding graphite production also helps, in the context of graphite supply for our downstream processing strategies as well. So we see, great opportunities there to feed into our European and our US strategy on that front.
Okay, great. Well, there's no further questions at this time. I'll just hand back to Trevor for closing remarks.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks everybody that's dialed in or registered for this conference. So I think really great news for Volt and our shareholders, potential new investors. So we see significant opportunities going forward, built around this expansion into lithium in Europe, and building on our already, what I would say is a pretty significant asset base that we're building up in the graphite space. So to become, I think globally, one of the more significant suppliers in the battery mineral supply chain. So that'll take a little bit of time to roll out, but that's the nature of the game, and we're looking forward to kicking off over the coming 12 months.
Okay, well, congratulations, Trevor, and thanks to everybody for attending. Have a good afternoon.
All right. Thank you.